My project was about young children, and the title was Young Children and Parents Do Not Prefer Magical Problems and Magical Solutions. So a little bit of background is that we know from research and in general that children are exposed to magical problems in their daily lives. So this could be in the media, in movie characters, also in reality, fear of monster under the bed or fear of the dark. So we wanted to look more at how children cognitively perceive real and imaginary, real and magical, and how they problem solve or conceptualize these sorts of problems or situations. So that's what we wanted to look at first with children. So we did one study that focused on that. And then the second part was a survey about parent-child interactions. So we wondered how parents actually view their child's cognitive views and how they help them solve or conceptualize these sorts of things. So then on the right, you can see that a little bit on little couple blurbs about previous research. So from previous research, we learned that children can differentiate between what is real and what is not. And also they can separate fictional genres from each other. So children know the difference between a superhero and a princess. And then we also know that children can transfer information to and from similar contexts. So that also kind of goes with how they can separate things that are fictional from each other. So they also can transfer one problem to one solution. So they kind of work, their brains at this point, they work in this logical way. Also, we know that fantastical elements can increase students' learning in school. So sometimes students are more interested if a story or a lesson has a fantastical element to it. Also, children may have a reality bias because another study showed that children had faster response times when they were asked to recognize something that was real or something that was imaginary. They had faster response times for the realistic scenario. So we mainly wanted to look at two questions that we focused on in each study. And the first was, do children prefer magical solutions to magical problems? And how do children's parents influence this preference? So now to go into the method. So we recruited through the Imaginative Thought and Learning Lab, led by Dr. Van Riet. So we did email newsletters, we did social media posts, and then we had 55 children. And this went last summer into the first semester a little bit. And 65% were female, and they were preschool age children, so between ages 3 and 6. And then we had 2 storybooks. One was realistic. So it was a character named Casey that had a painting that they made in school. And then 2 characters that went to a magical enchanted forest near their neighborhood. So that was a magical story. So in each of these stories, the main characters experience 4 problems. One example could be in the painting, Casey's friend thought the painting was ugly, so Casey had to solve this problem. And then in the enchanted forest, one character fell and scraped their knee, so how would they solve a problem like that? So in the context, the children were given 2 solutions. So one, Casey told the friend to stop being so mean, and the other one would be the magical solution, which Casey would sprinkle pixie dust on their friend. And in the enchanted forest, you would, when the character fell, you'd either have a realistic solution, like give them a Band-Aid or some medicine, or you'd have a magical solution, which would be putting a spell on the child's cut, and then they would suddenly be magically healed. So we wanted to see what children decided to choose based on the context of the actual stories. And then the parent survey was on Qualtrics. So we mainly wanted to find the answers to if they can report a magical problem that their child has had, and then what type of solution they used to solve this problem. If it was a solution that was magical, creating a fancy potion or a fancy monster repellent spray out of Febreze, or if they rationalized with their child and said, monsters aren't real, we'll turn on the lights for you, some things like that. So those were the main questions we sought to find with the parent survey. And then we wanted to see if there was any sort of relationship between these separate entities. So for the results, you can see that for our first question, do children prefer magical solutions to magical problems? You can see here that they do not. They have a reality bias. So they were more likely to choose the realistic solutions no matter what story they were told. And then it also says, we also found that age was negatively correlated with magical solutions in the real book. So as children were older, they were more likely to choose the realistic solutions in the real book as well. And then for the parent survey on the right, so we found that only 41% of parents could recall at least one magical problem that their children have had. So this question was just an open-ended one that parents could type whatever they felt was appropriate for the question. And then also parents who reported magical solutions were more likely to be magical thinkers themselves. So these parents were more imaginative themselves. In one of the questions we asked, do you daydream? Do you think about the past a lot? Do you feel as though sometimes you have an intuition of what might happen in the future? So parents who were more magical themselves were more likely to offer those types of solutions to their children. And then we found that preschoolers prefer realistic solutions to real problems, and that parents who were more fantasy oriented were more likely to offer more magical solutions. So those were our two main findings. And then next steps that we started to work on this semester a little bit. And then just in the future, some limitations and things that we should think about are, number one, parents' accuracy in recalling past events. So since we're asking them on a survey, they have to think back on, a magical problem their child has had. And it's possible that they can't really think of it correctly or can't report exactly every single type of problem that their child had had. And also, what would preschool-age children prefer when they were literally living through a magical problem? So an idea that we had was to place children in a context where they are experiencing something magical happen. And we thought that it's possible that children would be more likely to choose something magical that they believe to be real. So this is actually placing the child in that position where they would be able to choose after experiencing something that seems magical. And, we had a bunch of ideas like a light that changed colors by a remote, and a stuffed animal that moved or talked, and maybe even a magic trick. So we would kind of make the kids believe that they're in this magical world when they're really not. So we were really excited to get started on that part of the study, but unfortunately, due to the circumstances, we cannot. But we're still continuing to collect data for the parent survey, since we can do that online and we can work on that remotely. So we've gotten a couple of responses from that, which is great. And hopefully in the future, I can, or maybe someone else in our lab group can work on expanding this project to explore the next steps. And I think that is all. Thank you. And any questions?
Thank you so much, Julia. We'll wait a couple seconds to see if any questions come through. In the meantime, do you have any next steps for yourself that you could talk about?
So, I'm not sure. I think also including children that are older and also their perceptions of what is real and magical. We did a lot of work in the Children's Museum, and children that were older were really interested in this project. So maybe a more complex storyline that children that are older could relate to more, because the stories were pretty simple since they were for preschool age children.